Hey everyone! If you're like me, those perimenopause symptoms are driving you crazy. Well, I've got a little help for you. All you need to do is go to my midlifewithcourage.com website, and a little box is going to pop up that's going to ask you if you'd like to get my free ebook called Balancing Your Hormones. It's a short little guide with tips that you can use throughout the day, super easy, to help you balance out those hormones through the things that you do. So check it out, midlifewithcourage.com. Now let's get back to the show.
You have to surrender to your emotions. The biggest problem people have is they believe they're not supposed to grieve, or they're not supposed to grieve with other people. And they don't know how to grieve in order to let that emotional energy release from their body. And it is a biological response to the loss of a significant bond. We're social beings. When you lose a really close bond, this whole thing of grief, it's a biological response. So you need to allow the emotions that come up to release, but people don't know how to do that.
You are listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. This is where women in midlife come for inspiration, motivation, and sometimes a little education to help them flourish after 40. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Midlife with Courage. I am Kim Benoit, your host. I am so happy to have you here listening, and I'm also so happy to have my guest here today. Her name is Dr. Michelle Peticolas. Dr. Michelle, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us where in the world you are and what you do.
Well, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I originally came from the East Coast. So where are you, Kim?
I'm in Wisconsin,
Ah,
if you
okay.
couldn't tell
So
by the nasally accent.
yeah, I actually was teaching in Minnesota for 2 years.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah.
I kind of understand that upper part is pretty cold up there.
Uh-huh.
But I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have pretty mild weather overall.
Nice.
And I am a life transformation coach, and I work primarily with mid-life, mid-career women who have gone through a major life challenge or loss that has thrown them off track, gotten them stuck, and I help them to release the complex grief they're struggling with, make peace with their past, and move forward in their lives, and actually use the grief as a gateway, as a catalyst for where they're going to go next.
Before we jump into that, tell us about a time when you felt courageous or you showed courage.
Well, I've thought about that, and there are a number of them, but I'm going to save the main one for later because it's more about my catapulting into my career as a coach.
Sure.
But a lot of them had to do with geographical moves. So when I finished college, I moved to Indiana. And that was like moving away from my hometown was like really, really scary. But the next big one was moving to California because I left my family and I left all the things that I was used to and familiar and moved to California, moved to share an apartment with a woman I hardly knew. And thank goodness, because she introduced me to her friends. She introduced me to her temp agency where I started getting work, and she introduced me. Yeah, and she introduced me to her car mechanic. So I actually got a
Oh,
car, and he's still my car mechanic. So she made my transition way, way easier.
and a car mechanic is a big deal. I married one, so
Ah,
I
good for
basically
you.
I don't have to worry about, how the car is doing. He takes care of all of it. I've been very lucky, so that's
Well,
huge.
I married a man who is very handy also. He's a
Nice.
woodworker and he
Oh,
can do
nice.
construction. So, I mean, if something goes wrong with the faucet, we can work on it and fix it. Stove, he can do that.
Nice.
Very
Nice.
nice. Yay
Nice.
for men like that.
Yes, for sure. Okay, we just got off there a little bit, but so let's go back to talking about how you're helping other women when they hit these pivots, maybe we want to call it. How did you decide that that was your life's work? How did you get to that point?
Thank you for that question. So now you're going to hear the other story of courageousness. So if you had known me a number of years ago, you would have been thinking I was the last person you'd ever imagine to be a grief coach because I was personally shut down emotionally. I had no idea what I was feeling because I had decided at a very young age that the way to survive was to figure out what other people wanted and give it to them. And then life would be good. And you know what? For a lot of years, it worked really well. All through high school, through college, National Honor Society, Phi Beta Kappa. I went all the way to the epitome of what I thought was lovability, and that was my PhD. It wasn't, but but that's another story.
Yeah.
So anyway, a number of things happened that kind of threw my life off track. I lost my first job in Minnesota. I then later on, I lost my husband. Well, he actually left me for another woman, my first husband. And I joined a spiritual community. And I think that helped me to open up my heart, to start to feel and to experience life in a different way. And then when I met my current husband, I realized that I had these issues around abandonment. Well, of course, my first husband left me, but my father left me when I was 2 years old for a very brief time, but enough. So I went and did some very deep work, early childhood work. And then my parents started dying. First my father and then my mother, 6 months apart.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is the story. My mother was dying second, and I went back to help her finish up business. She had been a toy designer in a time when women did not do those sort of things. She, with my aunt, would go to New York and sell their designs to major toy companies in New York City.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I've met people who have remembered her toys.
Oh my gosh.
So I went back to help her finish up her business. I was the task-oriented daughter. So we're sitting in her studio, and I'm going through her papers. And she's got gobs of stuff because somewhere along the line she acquired a Xerox machine. And so she Xeroxed everything. So I'm going through her papers and I pick up one. And it's the Xerox. And I say, "Do you need this anymore?" And she looks at it and she says, "Oh, I guess I'll never finish that project." Her words pierced my heart. I mean, I was just stunned, speechless.
Mhm.
Because in that moment, I got what deadline really meant. She knew she was dying. But instead of engaging her, which I would do now, I took it back and I said, "We don't need to deal with this right now." It was one of my biggest regrets. It's probably one of the things that propelled me into grief and loss. But the
Wow.
other thing was that she had regrets. She had regrets that she had run out of time. And if she had regrets, who she was like my poster child for living your passion, sometimes to the neglect of her children, who she had six of.
Mm.
If she had regrets, where did that leave me? Because I was busy looking around outside at everybody else. And so, what I decided after she died was I was going to make a documentary film about death because I was so impacted. I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, nobody told me about this. Nobody prepared me for this and how
Yeah.
intense it was. So I actually made 3 films. And in the process, I joined hospice and I started leading partner loss support groups. And I said, this is what I want to do. They couldn't believe how different my group meetings were. People would be laughing because I saw immediately that this was an opportunity for rebirth.
Mhm.
It wasn't a time necessarily to be stuck. It was a cocoon time of reformulating who you are. And so that's how I got started. And after I finished with hospice, I got into coaching.
Wow. Oh my goodness, so much in there. The first thing, just to go back, figuring out what other people wanted and then giving that was your basis. I can relate to that
Oh,
so
yeah.
much. I mean, how many of us do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and trying to, that's kind of one of my things now is part of my, I don't know if you say a mission, but I'm trying to let women who are listening, our midlife women, know that they don't have to rely on what the outside world is telling them to be true. It's they know inside them what they've got and what they want to do, and they need to go do it. So that just
It's
kind
a
of,
great mission.
yeah,
Fabulous. We need this. Women need to really step up into their power.
yeah, yeah. And then death is a topic nobody wants to talk about,
Even now. And I
even
mean, I've been
now.
doing this for over 25 years.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the deadline, what deadline really means, that just, oh, that hit me.
Yeah.
I used to kind of make fun of my dad because he still, like, he'll read the obituaries and he'll joke, well, it's because I just want to make sure I'm not in them, you know. But now I'm finding myself reading them too. And I'm not telling him that either because I don't want to have him tease me. But you get that feeling where time is limited in a way, and I want to do this and that and that and everything else. So, how can we learn that sooner, do you think? Or is it possible?
I don't know that it's possible. And you know, the thing is to learn it before you die, you know, because
Yeah.
however much time you have left, once you have that awakening, once you have that realization that time is limited and you are here for a reason and you want to fulfill that reason, then you know, whatever time is left. I mean, I've seen people and I've heard about people who have changed the way they've done things within, you know, months or even weeks of their death.
Hmm.
So it's never too late until you stop dreaming.
Sure, sure. And we talked about making peace with your past. Let's kind of,
Yes.
there's a lot there.
Unpack that. Yes. So for me, my past had to do with this error in my perception of the world that happened when I was 2 years old. And those first 3 to 5 years of your life are critical for the development of your mental and emotional capacity.
Hmm.
They actually did studies. The London Journal of Pediatric Care did a review of the literature all around children that were neglected in childhood, mostly in orphanages. And they found that it had a huge impact on them for life because of that not getting that love and nurturance.
Hmm.
For many years, I mean, certainly during my parents' generation, parents were not taught that their children needed love and affection as much as they needed food and clothing and shelter. And they figured if they gave their children that, that was enough, but it isn't. That nurturance, that love, that reassurance, that support, that's what children need the most. And my mother already had two children. I had two older sisters, and she had been a young bride. She was overwhelmed. So I bonded with my father, but he was in the army. And when I was 2 years old, he was transferred to Japan. And I was devastated. I don't remember it, but I know because when I wake up in the morning, I still kind of wake up with that response. Like I must have woken up and found out he was gone. And my mother was busy moving a household and two children over to Japan. So she was not able to console me. So I learned very quickly that I had to stop crying. I had to stop being emotionally upset because it dehydrates you. You know, it's not, it doesn't
Yeah.
work. If it
It's
doesn't work, it doesn't
exhausting.
work. Yeah. So I gave up on my emotions. I did not know how I felt. I was not in my body. For a long time, I hung out in my brains. And then when I got into a spiritual community, I hung up and out, you know, in spiritual la la land. And then when I did that early childhood program, I started to put it all together. First of all, no blame to my parents.
Sure.
They had stories way worse than I had. Way, way worse. So if they didn't know how to nurture, it was because they weren't taught how to nurture.
Right. Right. I think that's the key sometimes if we've had what we think is a quote unquote bad childhood or, things that happened, you have to go back and realize they were doing the best they could with what they had. And
Absolutely.
it sounds kind of cliche, but it's true,
It is.
you
And
know.
then you decide yourself, the buck stops here.
Yep.
I'm going to get the work that I need so that I don't pass that on to other people.
Right, right. It drives me crazy when I know people who just dwell in that and, oh, it was so bad and I had it so bad, but then they don't take the next step.
They
And
don't take the next step. And when people work with me, I use that story, that past story, help them transform the story so that it goes from a victim story to a story of empowerment. It's the
uh,
hero's journey.
uh, can you tell us a little bit more about that, Dr. Michelle? How does that work, changing the story?
Well, we've all watched movies, right? We've seen the hero story over and over and over again. We just need to rewrite our story and apply it to see ourselves. I sometimes ask my clients to talk about themselves as, well, there was this little princess that was born, and there was this the queen and the king. So we mythologize it so that, you can step away from it a little bit. And then I ask them to go and talk about who are the key elements in it. Who are your allies? What was your mission? Who were your adversaries? Who was the gatekeeper? Who was the trickster? All these different characters. Now, they might not have all of them, but it
Sure.
helps them to look at these people as archetypes as opposed to, people who are making their life miserable. And so that's how I help them to do
Interesting.
that. And they
Yeah.
rewrite it and they say, okay, so what are your milestones? And we all have these traditional milestones: graduating high school, graduating college, getting married, first child, blah, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
we also have turning points. And turning points are things where something happens that we suddenly go in a different direction. And that's what I also help them get in touch with, because the turning points are often the ones, like for me, that moment that my father left me was the first turning point.
Mhm.
And then when my first husband left me, that was a huge turning point.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Kim here. I just wanted to remind you that I have a brand new product on my online shop at midlifewithcourage.com. They are beautiful affirmation cards just for you. These are a product that I created. I'm very proud of them. They're called your Daily Dose of Courage. Each day you take a card and you can go in order. They are numbered 1 through 31 for each day of the month, or you can just take them out at random. Use them just to give yourself a little positive message. Maybe you want to use them as a journaling prompt. You can even use them in the evenings before you go to bed as a way of just having a little positive, courageous message to read before you go to sleep at night. So go to midlifewithcourage.com and go on the online shop. The link is right there on the first page, and grab your copy of your Daily Dose of Courage affirmation cards. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, like your first turning point, you didn't realize it was a turning point, I bet. Well, obviously you
No,
were only
well,
2 years
we,
old, but
okay.
I mean, some of these things you go back and sometimes I've thought back and oh, that happened and oh my gosh, this made me do that. I didn't realize it at the time because I was so in it, you
Right,
know.
right.
I
Well,
love how
sometimes we don't know it unless our parents tell us the stories.
mm-hmm.
And you have to remember that when they're telling you stories, they're telling their stories through their own lens and their own insecurities and their own worries. And sometimes they may make it more dramatic than it really was.
Yes, yeah, I've experienced that as well. So you help them tell their story, and let's talk a little bit more about your work with hospice and patients or the people that are in the hospice realm. What would be some lessons that you've learned that you want to share with the listeners today?
If you have somebody in your life that is dying, you need to be there for them. Don't let it go. Go there and be there. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, because although I did go back to see my mother before she died, when she was actually actively dying, I did not go back.
Mm.
And I had regrets about that. And I think I actually was holding on to her until I finally let her go, because I had all this stuff going on. Mainly, I was doing a community access TV show, and I had a show that was that weekend, and I said, well, if she's still alive after the show is over, I'll go back. And so then the show's over, and she's still alive. And I said, oh my God, I can't keep her alive. I need to let her free. And I said, I
Oh,
burst into tears. I said, Mom, it's not about me. You
yeah.
can go. I'm fine.
Yeah.
She died that night.
Oh my gosh.
We don't know that we actually can keep people alive by not letting them go.
Yeah. Oh, hmm. I'm gonna cry.
That's good. Crying's good. Crying's good.
Yeah, not when you're trying to do a podcast, though. Yeah, no, I've heard of that before where, people are holding on, and someone just says it's okay, and then they do. They pass. But
I have another story on that too. They can
yeah.
also time their death to suit you. So I had one case in one person had told me that her father was dying and her mother was taking care of him and she was going for vacation to go down and help her mother out. And she said, "Oh my God, if only he would die when I'm there, then she wouldn't have to deal with all the stuff after I'm gone." And so she talked to the hospice nurse, and the hospice nurse said, "Tell him." So when she got there, she said, "Dad, it'd be really helpful if, you could pass while I'm here." She said, I
Oh
don't
my
know exactly the
gosh.
word she used, but she said, to help mom out. And he did. He died
He
while
did.
she was there. So she could
Wow.
be there. Can you imagine? Yeah, we can really do that. We can do that.
Interesting.
And there was another case of a woman who, if he would just last like a couple of more weeks, she would get that last whatever retirement check or social security check or whatever it was. And he did. He did. And some
Oh,
people, they last until they get through Christmas or they get through,
yeah.
that birthday.
Yeah, because you don't want to associate the day they died with something,
Right.
a celebration. Well, it is a celebration in one way,
Yeah.
but something else. I see yeah, yeah.
But it's also wanting to have that last bit. So here's another thing, and I know this is not really but I spent a lot of time talking about this. I did a lot of presentations with my films. And sometimes the loved one that you have does not die when you're in the room. They wait until the
Mm,
moment you go to the bathroom or you go get that cup of coffee
mm-hmm.
because they can't do it while you're there because the attachment, the love is so strong, they can't let go.
Oh, that is a beautiful way to put it. I I mean, that's because how many times have people like agonized? Well, I walked out of the room and then they passed and they feel bad about it. But
Yeah.
if they could just know what you just said, that would be amazing. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I was a nurse for a long time, and as a young nurse, I basically started in OB labor and delivery. So thankfully I didn't, have to deal with people dying right away. But eventually I did, and it scared me a little bit until I actually experienced it. And it's very peaceful, really. We put so much emotion into it and fear of it. And when you think about it, when you experience it, it's really a transition.
Well, it's a big one and it's
Yeah.
cosmic. And
Yeah.
and in the moment, if you were to take a camera and videotape it,
Mhm.
it would be really boring. But when you're there,
Mhm.
it's the mystery of life. It's
Yeah.
that moment of that person being there. So I had a friend who died and she knew I was into this whole death and dying stuff. And so we got the call that this was the day and we needed to get there. The nurses told us and we hospice nurses and we got there. And her brother and sister-in-law were there and they're like, "Why is she holding on?" And I said, "Well, is there anybody in the family who's holding her on?" And they were thinking about that. And she was in coma. She was not awake. And then,
Mhm.
then suddenly she sits up in bed, sits up, and she looks in the corner of the room with this look of surprise and awe. And then she drops down and she's dead. And now, as I said, with the
Wow.
camera, it would be nothing. But when you're in
Yeah.
there, you're like, oh my gosh.
I think it was my grandpa who passed, and he was talking. It sounded like he was talking to our grandma before he went, and she had already passed. Um,
Yeah, well, she was probably there waiting for him. He probably
yeah,
saw her.
we were kind of joking because he kind of had a little lady friend, just a friend that he met, and she was probably chewing him out a little bit about that lady friend before he came. But oops, no, but yeah, but I think there's so much more to explore with that area, and we don't really. It's a sad time for people who are, left here, but it there's so much more to it that we really do need to
Well, and
explore.
there are things to do. There are things to do
Hmm.
how you navigate that. And it's an amazing, very, very special time.
Yeah.
Because if you're really close to the person who is dying, you are in that liminal space between this world and the next. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very magical. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts you in that moment of realizing this is the most important thing. Nothing else on my schedule is as important as this. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty goosebumpy,
It
you know?
is. It
Whoa.
is. Yeah, definitely. Feeling them right now. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I feel like we could just chat about this for a long time. But where would you like people to go to find you if they want to learn more or work with you or both?
Well, let me tell you to kind of pull back a little bit so they would
Sure.
understand why they would want to. So I use a program and I have this name for it that talks about the process called serve. So you may think, oh, serve, especially if you've been a people pleaser, is a serve. What? No, you let grief serve you. So the S
Um,
stands for surrender. You have to surrender to your emotions. The biggest problem people have is they believe they're not supposed to grieve or they're not supposed to grieve with other people. And they don't know how to grieve in order to let that emotional energy release from their body. And it is a biological response to the loss of a significant bond.
mhm,
We're social beings. When you lose a really close bond, this whole thing of grief, it's a biological response. So you need to allow the emotions that come up to release, but people don't know how to do that.
mm-mm.
But first thing is to surrender. Then the next one, E, is engage. People are so busy being shamed about grieving. They don't want to see other people, or they're afraid, or they will reach one or two people and they'll overwhelm them, or they'll choose the wrong people and they'll feel more shame. I help my clients to develop their social community to support them because the most important thing they need after they've lost a significant bond is being surrounded by people that care about them and are going to be there for them. So that's the E.
Mhm.
Then the next is R, which is reframe, and that's is changing the story. Not only the story of the person who died, but for people I work with, also their whole life story, so that they see this loss as part of their journey, not the end of their journey.
Oh,
It's like, oh, this is another turning point. Where do I need to go from here? So the next V is vision. Where do you go from here? Where are you going? What would you want to do? And you don't have to like think about that with your head. Your story will help you to figure out what you want to do. And I will help you to figure out what you want to do. And then the last one is express. E, the last E is express, that you express what your vision is so it becomes embodied in the world. It comes forth instead of just being a thought in your head.
this is very important work that you're doing, and thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. I love it. This is my mission. This was what I realized after I made the film. This was my mission. In fact, the films were all about waking people up to the fact that their lives were short and they never knew when they were going to end. And they
Right.
needed to start living fully now.
Yeah. 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 Live every moment. That's my favorite phrase. And
Yeah.
YOLO.
So back to your question, how can
Yeah.
people reach out to me? So I have a checklist. It's the complex grief checklist. And people can find out whether they have complex grief, which, as I said, is usually it's amplified. Your current loss is amplified by your earlier losses that have never been healed. And so when we work together, we heal it all. We give you a clean slate so you can move forward.
Hmm.
So they can get the complex grief checklist by going to complexgriefchecklist.com.
Okay.
And they need to put that up in the top bar, the Google bar. They don't search for it. They put it in their complexgriefchecklist.com and they will get it.
Okay. And this isn't just about grief over people dying. This could be grief over any type of loss, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Any major change. Now, here's the interesting thing that I have noticed and realized is that almost any major loss has to do with losing bonds, connections, and that's where the grief comes from. So, let's say you move across the country. Well, you may feel grief about that. Let's say you get a new job. Well, you've lost all the connections you had with the last job. You got a promotion. You've suddenly won the lottery. You might, suddenly people are relating to you in a different way.
Yeah,
So it doesn't have to be death. In
sure.
fact, divorce is a big one. Only
Yeah.
the problem with divorce is that people don't expect you to grieve. They expect you to maybe be angry, but they don't expect you to grieve. And yet I've worked with plenty of women around divorce.
Sure, I bet. I would think retirement would be one too.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Yes, because now not only have they lost the connection, but they've also lost their purpose and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize that in my program, I help you to get that purpose back. I
Yeah,
help you to see where you need to go from here.
for
Yeah, you're
sure.
right.
Wow. I will put the link to that checklist in the show notes. I also know you have a website where you've got your movies and your other resources. Is
I
that
do have trailers to the movies, and if people do want to reach out to me, there is a contact thing. By the
okay?
way, my website is under reconstruction, but a very long
Oh, okay.
process because there were some technical issues that got run into. But you can see the trailers of the movies, and there is a contact form if you want to contact me that way. And
Okay.
there's also a free offer on there, which is my Essentials for Grieving Well,
Okay.
but if you get the checklist, you're going to get most of that anyway. I mean, you'll get it. So
Sure.
just do the checklist and
So we'll
find
just do
out.
the checklist in the show
Yeah,
notes and then people can
yeah,
get that and they can find out more. Awesome.
right.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Michelle, if I hate to say goodbye to you. This has been a wonderful conversation. But before we do say goodbye, is there any one last little advice or nugget of information or maybe something we didn't cover that you want to share with the listeners?
I would say you are essential. You are important. And you are in this world to fulfill that potential that you came into this world for. Don't wait. Start living fully right now because the world needs you.
Hooray. I love that. And I'm just going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, please grab that checklist at complexgriefchecklist.com. And thank you again, Dr. Michelle.
Oh, my pleasure, Kim.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. If you liked what you heard, I would love it if you would leave a review, or even better, send a link of this episode to a friend. Until next time, take care of your beautiful self.